Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to another Battlefront 2 video, and today we're actually doing something completely different from what I usually do. But if you guys have been playing Battlefront 2 for a while now, then you probably already know that there's some cards in the game, star cards, that actually have some issues with them. And a good amount of people have already made videos on this, whether they have issues or not, whether some don't work, some do work, some have hidden effects. But these videos are all pretty old, and the posts are usually pretty old too, so I figured, you know what, let me make a new one. 2023, since the game isn't being updated at all anymore, so now you can pretty much watch this and be 100% sure that everything that I'm going to be talking about here is going on right now. Okay, now that we're at the list, we're going to be starting with the light side, and we're going to be starting in order with Luke Skywalker, and we're starting with his Epicenter card. So, this is going to be the most basic hidden effect card, since most of you guys should already know this, but just in case some of you out there haven't figured this out yet, then this is good for you. When you have this card equipped, Epicenter will deal bonus damage to the target standing within half of your radius, which is when a second circle comes up to let you know where that radius is. But what the star card doesn't tell you is that this 40 bonus damage will always go through an enemy's block as long as they're within your inner circle. So let's say you're fighting a Darth Vader and they're blocking your default damage, that 40 bonus damage is always going to count.
Bye, have a great time!
Alright, easy stuff. Now, next up is Deflection Mastery. So, not only does this one have a very crappy description, which says blocked blaster shots are deflected super accurately, but it also barely works. You can usually only tell that it's deflecting them accurately from very, very far away. So, usually from near distances, it won't really work, and the stamina cost is still going to be increased. So, this ability is mostly useless and does not work. You do not want to use this card. Okay, next up is Jedi Fighter, and this card is actually pretty damn good. What it says here is that Luke Skywalker's melee strikes and blaster deflections both drain less stamina, and that's true, but what this card doesn't tell you is that it's not just the strikes and deflections, but it's also any regular blocking as well, so that pretty much counts as all your stamina costs. So this pretty much gives you a stamina cost reduction on everything by 35%. Right off the bat, which is really freaking good. But that's it for Luke, and now we're moving on to Leia. Now, her first card, Optimized Shield Deployment. It's actually very simple. This card says that it reduces the cooldown of your shield by 30%, but it actually only reduces it by 25%. Now, for those of you that have been using this card for a while now, oh boy. Fearless. The blast radius of thermal detonators is increased. Anyone that read that thought that was a good idea to get. But if you didn't know this already, then this card does not work at all. It does not do anything to your detonators, does not make the blast radius bigger, it does not make it do more damage, it does nothing. So make sure that you unequip this card if you have it equipped. And that's it for Leia. She only had 2 cards messed up. Alright, that's 2 down. Next up is Han Solo, and he actually only has 1 card that has a hidden effect, but I think you guys are actually going to like how this card works, so here it goes. This card is called All In. Each defeat with shoulder charge tackle will reduce the recharge time before the ability can be used again. So usually what this ability does is, if someone's at low health and you shoulder bash them and you kill them, your ability recharges super fast, like you can basically use it like 2 seconds after. But what this card doesn't tell you is actually an insane overpowered passive ability, in my opinion, which you will see right now. Okay, so when I read the hidden effect for this card, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I did not believe it. It sounded way too insanely overpowered to be true. I mean, it's not too overpowered, I guess, but it's still pretty crazy. So I went to a multiplayer lobby to test this out, and because I had to see if it was true or not. And I was super surprised when I noticed that when I killed somebody with shoulder charge, all of my other abilities started recharging faster too. Now keep in mind, this is me using All In, but since my character wasn't leveled up all the way, I don't actually have the maxed out card. So this was an almost maxed out card, and the cooldown is 18 seconds for your grenade. But check out how long it takes for it to recharge with the All In effect. Okay, so the timer stops at 8 seconds and a half. Now, I did start the video and then I started the timer about half a second after, so we could round this up to 9 seconds. And that means that the 18-second cooldown was cut in half, from 18 seconds to 9 seconds, which is insane. Now, I didn't test this with his sharpshooter ability, but given that both of them move faster, I'm pretty sure that that one also has a half cooldown as well. But just so you guys know, when you have this cooldown, it will stop working when you use your shoulder bash. So if you want to keep the 50% cooldown on the Death Knight and the sharpshooter abilities, you need to make sure that you do not use your shoulder bash. Unless you can kill somebody with your shoulder bash, because as soon as you press on the ability, the cooldowns stop working. So if somebody's in low health and you still have the cooldowns on, you can just go and kill them with the shoulder bash and you'll keep the cooldowns the whole time, which is a really freaking good ability for Han Solo and one I've been using since I found this out. But okay, moving on from Han Solo, and now we're at Chewbacca. So the first card that he has an issue with is called Extended Shock. But this card's going to be extremely simple. Basically, it says that it gives you an added shock duration by 40%, which sounds great, and a 20% larger recharge rate, which doesn't sound too bad. But the added shock duration isn't actually 40%. It only increases it by 20%, which is the lowest tier of this ability card. And the recharge rate is not 20%, but it's actually 50%, and it's extremely bad because it makes your shock grenade from 15-second cooldown up to more than 20 seconds, which is insane. Okay, now next up is Charging Frenzy. This card is supposed to help Chewbacca receive less damage, minus 50%, when he's using a slam attack, which sounds pretty good. But Chewbacca actually already has a 30% damage reduction when he starts using this ability, so this 50% just gets added to that 30%, which makes it 80% damage reduction, which is actually pretty damn good if you're planning on just going into a group of enemies. So this card is actually pretty good. The one next to it is not that great. I don't recommend it. And that's it for Chewbacca. He had one negative card and one positive card, and that's it. Alright, now next up is Lando. Now, I know what you guys are saying right now. It's Padme, but this is just a mod, so just completely disregard that. But this is Lando that we're talking about here. Now, the first card that he's going to be having an issue with is called Welcome to Cloud City. This card is supposed to increase the size of his smoke grenade, but this actually doesn't do anything at all. So if any of you are using this card, make sure that you take it off of your loadout right now because it does not work at all. Alright, next up is Disabler Growth, and for this card, it's supposed to grow by 30% over the course of 5 seconds, but this is not actually the case. It only grows by 25%, which is 5% off. Not that big of a difference, but it's still less than what it says. Alright, Quick Shock. Now this one is so messed up because so many people that use this card will always wonder why it won't work. So it says here that if the Disabler is detonated within 5 seconds, so basically that means before 5 seconds, it will shock people for a longer duration. It says the added shock duration is 30%. Both of these are wrong. It will only add a 20% shock duration, and you have to make sure that you detonate it after 5 seconds, not before. So that's usually the issue with this card, is that a lot of people will try and use it and it won't work. It's supposed to be after 5 seconds, not before 5 seconds. And that's pretty much it for Lando. He's got 3 cards with issues. All 3 of them are a bit less useful than they say they are, but it's not too much of a difference. It depends on whether you guys use these cards or not. Okay, now moving on to Rey. I know you're looking at Finn right now, but just it's another mod, so ignore that too. First card we're going to talk about here is Damaging Strike. So when you read this card, it actually sounds kind of overpowered. It says that with every enemy you hit, you'll do 30% more damage. So if you were to hit like one person, that's 30, then another one, that's 60. But that's not actually how this card works. All this card actually does is give your dash strike a plain 30% damage boost. So if you have this card equipped, anytime that you use this ability, it's just going to do 30% more damage than it normally does. Alright, next up is Strong Mind. Mind Trick has an increased area of effect, so this card is supposed to increase the area of effect by 30%, but it actually only increases it by 25%. Only 5%, I know, but it's not 30. So, and now it's Deep Mind. Mind Trick has a longer duration on targets that are revealed by your Insight ability, so the added duration is supposed to be 30, but this one is also only increased by 25% instead of 30. And that's it for Rey. She has one ability that is just a damage boost, and 2 abilities that give 5% less of what they say they give. Okay, so now that we're done with Rey, we're going to move on to Yoda, and one of his cards is called Unleashed. His Unleashed card increases the base range of his kind of push ability by 25%, but it actually limits the amount of damage that he can do. Because the base range gets increased, for some reason it doesn't count as part of the growing range of his abilities, so whenever you're getting shot at or you're blocking abilities, your range grows and you do more damage as it gets bigger. When you get to your max range, instead of 190 damage, it just does 160. So it's not really worth getting this card since the range grows extremely fast and it's extremely large when you have it at your max capacity. So I would recommend not using this card. It's really not that great. Next up is Earned It I Have. This card is supposed to speed up the energy buildup, which we just talked about, but it actually does not seem to make a single bit of difference to how fast it grows. So try and make sure you do not use this card because it's pretty much useless. Next up, Size Matters Not. I actually really like this card because it's a somewhat messed up, broken card in a way. So basically what this card is supposed to do is heal you whenever you use your extra health. But it doesn't actually heal you for 50%. It heals you for probably around 60 to 70% of that extra health. And you can actually combine this ability with the other ability that actually gives you extra bonus health, and you can pretty much heal for about 100 health or more. But because it's such a good card, it definitely makes your cooldown a lot longer. But hey, it's still pretty good. But alright, now we're moving on to Finn. Everybody hates this guy because of the you-know-what. If you don't know about it, I'm not gonna mention it. But anyway, he actually only has one card that's messed up. He used to have a bunch of messed up cards, but luckily they were able to fix them in the very last update they made. This one is called No More Running. So this card is supposed to increase the amount of damage you do after you get 3 kills. But it's actually a lot better than that. You just start doing the extra damage right off the bat. So as long as you equip this card, your locked on ability will do the extra damage right away. Alright, moving on to everybody's favorite lad, Obi-Wan Kenobi. So, he only has one issue, and this card is called More Doubts. This card is supposed to increase his restrictive mind trick range by 50%, except it doesn't. It increases it by 45%, just 5% less, but not 50%. Now, moving on to the Chosen One. Anakin actually has one ability that has a positive hidden effect, Fierce Fighting. So, this card is supposed to decrease the cooldown of Passionate Strike by 4 seconds, but it actually decreases it by 5 seconds, 1 extra second more than it's supposed to. So, wow, that's just nice. That's great. So, if you decide to use this card, you can pretty much get your Passionate Strike a lot faster, and if you know how to use this ability, then this card will be perfect for you because it actually decreases it by an extra second more. And now, BB-8, the droid. So, he has a card called Roll Together. So, this ability is supposed to help his passive cooldown ability. Whenever you're near the droid, your abilities cooldown faster. Everybody thought that this card meant that he would start reducing their cooldowns by 15%, but since he already has a passive cooldown reduction of 6%, this card adds 15 percentage points. So, basically, his passive cooldown becomes 21%, which is pretty good as long as you have the card equipped. If you don't have the card equipped, 6% really isn't much, so this card is worth using if you want to help out your team. Okay, finally done with light side. Now it's time to look at the dark side, and we're starting with Boba Fett. And luckily he only has one issue, and this card is called Quick Refill. Okay, so this card is supposed to increase your jetpack refuel rate by 15%, but it only increases it by like about 12.3%. I don't know how these people got this number, but you know, they're the experts, not me. And now next up is Bossk, the lizard. Alright, so the first card we're looking at right now is called Trap Arming Speed. So this one's actually pretty good. Everybody uses it because usually when you're playing heroes versus villains, everybody's gonna rush you, and you want to make sure that those things are ready to explode as soon as you drop them. This card makes them blow up 60% faster, but it actually makes them blow up 65% faster. So a 5% increase to what it says it gives. Not bad. Alright, next up we have Spreading the Disease. This card is supposed to make his Dioxis Grenade 20% bigger, but just like Lando's Smoke Grenade, this card does not work at all. So make sure that you unequip this card if you have it equipped, and let's move on. And that's it for Bossk. 2 abilities, 1 positive, 1 negative. Now we're moving on to Darth Vader. Okay, so he's gonna have an issue with There Is No Escape. So this star card is supposed to increase his lightsaber throw range by 50%. But it actually only increases it by 45%. So 5% off. Not that big a deal, but it's not 50. And that's it for Darth Vader. Now moving on to Palpatine. Do it. Alright, so the first card that he has an issue with is called Amplified Aura. This card's hidden effect is actually the fact that he does not need 3 people to target the 30% damage increase. It activates immediately. So as long as you turn this card on, every time that you use your Dark Aura ability, you're going to do more damage with it. The damage increases from 15 damage to 19.5, which is pretty good. Alright, so next up is Prime Electrocution. This card is supposed to stun your opponents for 30% longer. So if you stun 3 people, they get stunned for 30% longer. This 30% increase is supposed to make it so that they can't move or shoot for 1.3 seconds. But what actually happens is that, yes, they do get stunned for 30% longer, so they can't shoot for 1.3 seconds, but they can't move for 60% longer instead of 30%. So they'll be able to start shooting, but they won't be able to move, and you can keep electrocuting them before they're able to, you know, start running away or moving, which is actually pretty damn good. Next up is Growing Darkness. Alright, so this card is supposed to make the radius of your Dark Aura effect grow over time by 20%. But it actually only increases the range by 10%. So this card is 10% less than what it's supposed to be. And that's it for Palpatine. Now we're going to go to Kylo. Alright, so the first one we're going to be looking at is Resilience. Alright, so everything that this card says it does is perfectly fine. Except this card does not work with certain villains. So basically this card only works when you're near lightsaber users or force users. So force users being like Palpatine, and all the lightsaber users, you know, Grievous, Dooku, things like that. So pretty much this card will not work if you're next to Bossk, Boba, Iden, Phasma, or the Ball. Alright, next up is Closing In. Alright, so this card doesn't increase the range by 40 like it's supposed to, only 30. But what this card doesn't say it does is that it doesn't just affect your leap from target to target, it actually affects the starting leap. So how close you have to be to someone before you can actually use the ability. So even though it doesn't increase it by 40%, it still increases both your leaping range and your starting range, which is actually not that bad. And that's it for Kylo. Now we're going to be moving on to Darth Maul. Now, we're going to be talking about his first ability, which is actually insanely overpowered, and a lot of people did not know this. So when you first read this card, I'm pretty sure you would probably agree with me when everybody thought that this card just sounded stupid. The card is supposed to give you a 16% damage reduction against blasters. I don't think anyone really cared for this, except it has a pretty insane hidden effect. Without having this card on, your spin attacks don't give you any damage reduction when you're attacking. So usually Maul is not that great of a character to duel with, even though he is pretty fast. His spins usually leave him pretty vulnerable. But when you put this card on, he actually ends up gaining a 60% damage reduction when you're using your spin attack, which is an insane thing to not mention in this card when it's only telling you about 16% damage reduction against blasters. This card literally helps his spin attack with 60% damage reduction, which is actually a lot. So ever since I found this out, I've been using this card, and man, oh man, I've been able to tell the difference. So if you guys haven't been using this card, I suggest that you start using it because it's actually really good. Alright, next up is Thrown to Slow. This card is supposed to increase the damage of your choke by 30 when you choke 2 or more enemies, but it actually only increases it by 19. So, not that great of a card, and it doesn't really increase the damage by much to begin with, so yeah, it's not that great. Fool Me Once is one that I personally use a lot in the beginning, because who doesn't want a faster recharge time, right? It's supposed to increase the cooldown on all your abilities by 10%, but it's actually way worse than that. As if 10% wasn't low enough, your lightsaber throw only gets increased by 4.7%, your chokehold by only 4.7%, and your spin by 5.3%. So honestly, I was thinking that this card was already pretty bad with it only being 10%. Now that I know the actual rate, I'm never using this card again. Alright, next up is Savage, and this card, technically speaking, what it does isn't actually recharge 75% faster, it reduces the recharge rate by 75. Something that this card also doesn't tell you is that you don't need to hit 4 different enemies with this ability to get the recharge. If you're able to hit 2 enemies twice in a row with your spin attack ability, then that will also help you get the buff where you recharge your abilities extremely fast. So that's actually not that bad. And that's it for Darth Maul. Now we're moving on to Iden. Alright, so you only have to worry about 2 cards for Iden, and these are called Shock Reach and Acquiring Targets. Now, what the cards say that they do is perfectly fine, except that they're swapped. So Shock Reach which is supposed to increase the shock range of your droid, is swapped with acquiring targets. The shock reach means that when your droid gets to someone, they're going to shock a big area. So if there's another hero next to that one, they're most likely both going to get shocked. The acquiring targets card is supposed to make your droid be able to go way farther out. So as long as you know what the cards do, then you're fine. Just remember that they're swapped. So if you want the extended droid reach, use shock reach. If you want the extended shock range, then use acquiring targets. Alright, Captain Phasma. She has her first ability, which is called the more the better. It's supposed to increase your turret rotation by 50%, which sounds pretty damn good. But it actually only increases it by 25%. And the turret already spins in a whole circle within 6 seconds, so this ability isn't really that great. Next up is laser wall durability. As you can tell, the developers stopped caring about this game and they didn't even bother to change the damn name, since she doesn't have a laser wall ability. But anyway, this card lets you know that if you get 5 kills with your staff strikes, it reduces the recharge time on all of your abilities by 25%. This card actually reduces the cooldown by 30% instead of 25, and only after 4 kills instead of 5. So you need less kills to get it, and the recharge rate is faster than it says, so that's not a bad ability. General Grievous. But alright, the first card that we're going to be looking at is called Lineup Weaklings. The card says that you have to make sure that you hit somebody, and as soon as you hit somebody with your Claw Rush, you'll be able to damage everybody else with 50 more damage. But this card's hidden effect is that it doesn't actually need you to hit anybody. As soon as you turn on this card, you're going to start doing 50 more damage right off the bat. Don't need to hit anybody at first, you just get it right away, which is pretty damn great. Now next up is a hidden effect between 2 abilities. Beating Heart and Flesh is Weak. Flesh is Weak grants you damage reduction when you're missing health. But because getting more damage reduction the lower your health is a pretty good ability, they needed to balance it by cutting Grievous's health regeneration in half. So basically, his health regeneration goes up half as fast. But if you have Beating Heart and Flesh is Weak both at the same time, Beating Heart will actually cancel the negative effect of Flesh is Weak, which means that his health regeneration will stay at the same rate while you still get the damage reduction, which is an insanely overpowered pair. But now that we're done with Grievous, we're moving on to Dooku. And believe it or not, he actually has no issues. So wow, that is insane. The first hero that doesn't have any abilities with issues. Good job, Dookie. And alright, now next up is BB9. And guess what? He doesn't have any issues either. Wow, Count Dooku and BB9, the Chads, the Sigma males. And that is all the hidden effects that have been uncovered in 2023. Pretty crazy. Now, I know this was a pretty long list, and I probably could have made it a little bit faster, so sorry about that. But, you know, I just wanted to kind of get into detail with anything that was wrong with any of these cards. And I also wanted to say thanks to the page that made this whole thing possible, which is on Steam. Thanks to Shuds and one collaborator. And then just also wanted to thank all the other people that helped him make this list, which were all these sites here. You can pretty much just Google them and you'll find them there. And these sites, like I said, they're all pretty old, but, you know, it has been a few years. But if it wasn't for these people, then this list wouldn't have been made possible, and I wouldn't have been able to make this video. So thanks to all of these people. But yeah, I'm super glad that I made this video because I know that a lot of you guys play on Xbox or PlayStation, so a lot of you wouldn't have a reason to come to Steam and look at the list here. So a lot of people wouldn't actually know to come here when they just try and look up answers online. They have no reason to go to Steam. So hopefully this helps all of you guys that are on consoles, and just remember to use all these hidden effects to your advantage. But yeah, hopefully this list helped you out, and I will see you guys in the next Battlefront video that I make. See ya!